right, welcome back everyone to another episode of the 5 and 20 podcast. I'm your host Joshua Miller, where we have another 5 questions to discuss in 20 something minutes. Today's esteemed guest is an award-winning author, international speaker, and a landscape architect. That's right. So, who better have one as a subject matter expert for school gardens? So, if you have a green thumb, your program does, or you're aspiring, thinking about it, you tried and failed, maybe stick around, you might get some tips.
Nice.
All right,
Very cool.
Matthew, welcome and thank you for joining in on this episode with us today. And I'd like to start the episode off with a little icebreaker, which is what is your guilty pleasure snack or food? Which is, I'm intrigued because you're not from the United States. So let's hear what
Oh,
it is.
I love that question. It's been a while since I've eaten it, but one of my favorite dishes, especially when I was a student, is a pasta with green pesto and chicken.
Oh, man.
I love that.
Speaking my language, that
Oh,
is
nice.
a regular item that we have in our household. Nothing better
Nice.
than fresh pesto either, man.
Yes, exactly. Fresh from the
All
garden,
right.
right?
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, Matthew, so you're a landscape architect, which, in itself is very intriguing. So let's start off with a quick intro of, what got you started and ultimately your why, which is,
Mm-hmm.
how it, just in general, landscape can positively impact our environment when done right.
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. And first of all, Josh, thank you very much for having me on your show. I'm a real fan of your work, and I think what you're doing in your business is really is impacting our planet on a great way. So congratulations for that. And to answer your question, so for me, we have to go a bit back in history. For me, it actually all started when I was quite young, and I grew up on a family farm. My father is a farmer, my brother is a farmer. And on that farm, when I grew up at a very, very early age, I was so fascinated about how it is possible, how crazy it is that if you have a little seed and you put it in the soil, that it can grow into a plant, in something magnificent, maybe even a tree. And I think this must have been around the
Mm-hmm.
age of 3, 4, 5 years old when I started to realize that and how magical that is. And from that magic, I said, like, I want to become a gardener. I want to grow my own food at that age of 5 years old. So we grew up on a farm. We didn't really have a vegetable garden because my father is mainly in like bigger cash crops like grains and things like that and cattle. So I said, like, I'm going to start a vegetable garden. And I had one of my earliest successes was with radishes. And to everybody who's listening, if you want to start growing your own food, radishes is like the easiest, simplest crop that you can grow. It grows super fast and it has very little maintenance. So I started, for some odd reason, I started off with that plant and I had some early success. I was able to harvest my own radishes at a very early age. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I thought I had everything figured out. Like, I'm going to be growing tomatoes, lettuces, everything. So I bought a bunch of seeds.
Yeah.
I just saw the whole garden and thinking like, okay, this is amazing. I seed the whole garden. I'm going to come back here a couple of weeks later and it will be full of all kinds of vegetables and everything. Now, I guess, Josh,
Uh-huh.
you know what happened next. After a holiday with my cousins, being away from the farm for a couple of weeks, I came back to my garden and it was like, oh my God, I was devastated. It was completely overgrown with weeds. And I was like, I still remember that I was like, why? And in fact, the question you asked, like the why I'm in this industry, why
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing all of this, started there. I started to like, how does nature work? Why does nature produce weeds? And from that moment until today, I started to study. Like, obviously I grew up as a normal kid, but then once I was 18, I said, okay, I want to continue in this industry. And I started to study landscape architecture. I did a bachelor's in Belgium. I went for a master's in Germany. graduated, worked in a couple of companies in Germany, and I was like doing the 9 to 5 job. It was like, from the outside world, it looked perfect, right? I had studied, I had a good degree,
Mm-hmm.
I was earning a decent amount of money. But then I was in this 9 to 5 job, and I'm very happy that I did it, because I learned a lot from the Germans. The German way of doing things in architecture and landscape architecture is really like they're the top of the top. So I learned a lot in that period, but I was like feeling, this is not what I really want to do. So I kind of went into a crisis. I was depressed. At that time, my girlfriend broke up with me, and I said, like, what is all of this? And I said, okay, I'm just going to go out into the world. And I always was connected to
Mm-hmm.
sustainability, ecology, sustainable farming. How can we use nature to our advantage? So I went out into the world. I did the world travel. I visited lots of eco resorts, farms that were doing it on a regenerative or organic way, and continued to learn. And from that, I started my own business. I started to design eco resorts for other people. I help one-on-one clients to get their dream garden realized, and we do that in a certain way that is in harmony with nature. Because for me, that's what we do with our company called Paulonia. That's that we bring together aesthetics and sustainability in one garden project. And more recently, I
Mm.
also started to teach people in a masterclass how they can actually become a master gardener themselves. Because I had a question from a client saying, like, okay, we we designed their garden, and she said, like, I really love what you do, but I have another part of my garden that I want to do, but I don't want a landscape architect anymore. I want to do it myself. So then I started to realize there's a
Nice.
whole group of people that don't need landscape architects, that don't even want them. And I was like, but they want to
Mm.
learn how to do it themselves. They are really ambitious. They really have some spare time in the evening and the weekends, and they want to make their hands dirty, but they have no clue how to do it, how to start. So from that idea, from that initial client, I started to build a masterclass, and it's been going on since about half a year, 1 year, and it's super amazing because the knowledge that I gathered over, well, it started when I was a kid, but especially in the last 10 years, I can bring that out to these people in this class, and they learn so much in such a short time.
Love it, love it. And you're a professional, obviously, and you had to start at the bottom, right? So you had that first garden that failed. I'm glad that you succeeded at that, and kept going at it. So speaking of starting at the bottom, though, right? Every plant, every vegetable, everything that's growing out of the ground starts with soil, right? So let's
Hmm.
talk about healthy soil. What is it? How do we achieve it? How do schools start to tackle that?
That's a great question, because Josh, you touched on something that is the essence of any garden success. It all starts with the soil, the health of the soil. And in fact, I can tell you that a healthy soil, no, I'm going to say it differently. 1 teaspoon of a healthy soil can have more microorganisms than there are people on the whole planet. So it's a complex system
What?
of how, yeah, exactly. It's crazy, right? So there's a complex system of organisms that work together to create a healthy system. And they are essential because what these microorganisms do is they take minerals, they take like digested plant material, compost, all of these things. They kind of digest it in their own way. And then in that turn, it makes it available for the plants to take that up in their roots. And I'm going to tell you something
Hmm.
even more crazy, is that the roots in the soil of the plants are like an inverted stomach, because research has shown that in our own stomach, in our gut health, which is now in the scene of health and wellness, gut health is a big topic. And it's exactly
Hmm.
these microorganisms that we can find in the soil are very similar to our own gut. So what's happening in the soil has a direct impact on our own personal health. So this just gives, like, it's complex to explain it, but in a nutshell, it shows that the health of the soil is directly linked to the health of us beings. because if you have a healthy soil, it will produce healthy crops. It can be like vegetables, but even nuts, even meat. Because if a cow can graze on a pristine landscape, it will also absorb all of these healthy minerals and microorganisms. And if you then eat that type of meat, then you'll be way healthier. So it all starts with the soil, and it is actually not that difficult to create a healthy soil. It's really about stopping. It's oftentimes stopping doing certain things, such as using chemicals in your garden or other quick fixes. And then there's other techniques, such as, well, what I teach in my masterclass is that there's a way you can do mulching. If people are not familiar with mulching, it's a way that you cover the soil so that all these microorganisms that I just explained, that they are protected. Because as it turns out, the soil is like the skin of our planet. And if the skin of our planet is open, it's not good. You can imagine even on your own skin, when it's open like that, it just gets infected.
Yeah.
There's other diseases, there's all things happening. So you have to keep your soil covered as much as possible. This is like one of the principles of regenerative gardening, sustainable gardening. So when you start to apply all of these methods, what also happens is your plants are healthier, they grow better, you can actually suppress weeds, or you keep them down as much as you can, and it becomes like a system that is way more in harmony with nature. So that's in a nutshell why healthy soil is hugely important for the success of a gardener.
Wow. So, point blank simple, healthy soil equals healthier food, right? And I did not know about the whole surface of the soil being exposed to the environment, how that's not healthy for it. So that's completely new to me. I mean, I feel like most gardens I walk into, there's exposed soil everywhere.
Exactly. That's a common thing. Like, and oftentimes it's part of the other generation, I would say. They like to have things tidy, which means you have a plant and then there's like nude soil in between. That looks pretty I don't know why we got to that point that we find that pretty, but just go and look in nature and find me one place in nature that looks like that. It's nowhere. It's very rare to see a bare soil. You might, after a wildfire, you might have it after a landslide. That's the only exceptions when it happens. And you know what? I will tell you something else related to this, if I may, that will explain why weeds come. Are you curious to know about this?
Yeah, let's go for it.
I'll give your listeners a short lesson. So and this is like, it all makes sense to when I was a kid, right? I was in my garden. I completely turned around the soil, put in some seeds, and thought, like, now I'm going to have all my vegetables. But what happens and this is how nature works. It's also part of my upcoming award-winning book, 12 Universal Laws of Nature, how to get the most potential out of your land. And there I talk a lot about that nature is very powerful at regenerating itself. So what happens if we destroy the surface of the earth? It becomes open, it's nude. Now nature will do everything in its capacity to restore itself. And as it turns out, the first plants that come to start the regeneration process, which is completely governed by nature, are plants that we call weeds, which are, in fact, they're not weeds. They are just trying to restore the health of the planet. So this is mind-blowing, right? Now everybody is like, weeds are bad and everything. But it's just nature's way of restoring itself. And what happens if, like, weeds are annuals? Weeds usually are, after 1 or 2 years, they die. Now, if you would take a field and leave it, like, have everything gone, like the bare soil, first thing comes the weeds. The weeds grow, they take over the whole surface. What happened in my small little garden as a kid. Now, if you would continue to do nothing, these weeds would grow, and 1 and 2 years, they get pretty tall, but then they would fall down on the surface and create this mulch layer, and start to protect the soil. Now, once this layer of new plant material starts to digest on that soil, a next generation of plants come, which are annuals. So these, which are
Wow.
perennials. And these are also plants that we have in our garden. They live several years. Now, the perennials will start to grow. Also, grasses start to get integrated. Now, again, a couple of years, probably around 5 years, if you don't do anything, the grass will keep growing. It will fall down. Now, this
Mm-hmm.
mulch layer creates a new environment for the next generation of plants, which are shrubs. So if you don't do anything, 5, 6, 7 years down the line, you'll start seeing shrubs popping up because the plants that preceded them have created that environment. Now, what happens next? It overgrows with bush, with like shrubs. Now, these shrubs, they live
Mm-hmm.
around 15 to 20 years. At a certain point, they add a lot of leaves to the ground. They increase the carbon content in the soil. They make everything more healthy. And after 15 to 20 years, they also finish their job of regenerating the soil. And guess what comes next? The bigger trees.
What?
The pioneer bigger trees start to grow. And it goes and it just continues
What?
until you have like this is called the succession of how plants grow in nature. And eventually you'll end up with a high diverse forest with, for example, oak trees that live several hundreds of years. So this is one of the laws of nature, how it actually works. Now,
Mm.
knowing this, you can use that as a gardener and tap into that knowledge and use it to your advantage. So
How so?
yeah, that's a really good question. Now, when you know that weeds come when the soil is bare, you don't want
Uh-huh.
weeds. Weeds are a pain in the ass. Nobody likes, excuse me,
No, no.
pardon my
Which
French.
is why I was gonna ask you.
So what you do is, if you plant new things in your garden, or if you do annuals for like salads or all these kinds of plants that you want to grow in your vegetable
Mm-hmm.
garden, you plant them or you seed them, and all of the soil that is bare, you mulch it, because in nature it would also happen eventually that the weeds would mulch the soil. So you're now actually doing that process of mulching, and in that way the weeds, they won't come up as much because you're already restoring the soil together with them. And then this process you keep doing. Now, even if you want a garden with like a vegetable garden is obviously higher in maintenance, and because
Yeah.
it's only annuals, you're kind of always competing with weeds. But already by using mulch,
Yeah.
you'll drastically decrease. But what's more interesting is when you focus in your garden on growing perennials and shrubs like berries, all kinds of edible
Mm-hmm.
plants that are not annual, you can create a beautiful, abundant garden that is full of edible plants where you go and pick things if you apply these systems. And obviously, it's more complex to explain than just like this podcast. There's more knowledge and specifics of how to do it and how to install it. But tapping into how
Wow.
nature works and how has always worked since millions and millions and millions of years is gonna save your back, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just the little bit of knowledge that you're sharing right now. I mean, I don't have a green thumb myself. I'm going to definitely admit that. And it's amazing. I always think about how amazing the body is, right?
Yeah.
And what it does to restore itself. And you just really broke it down in really good terms, easy to understand terms of how the environment is with that, with regards to something as simple as soil and plants. Had no idea. But you
Hmm.
did briefly touch on the topic of food gardens are a lot of work. So what can schools do to do more smarter gardening, right? So that it's a little bit easier, reduce maintenance. Maybe there's some tools of the trade that they can throw into the program to make lives easier.
Yeah, I think what they can definitely do is go big in the mulching system. Like you have to obviously select
Mm-hmm.
certain materials for mulching. Like on our family farm,
Mm-hmm.
we now came across we grow beans for like kidney beans, and the
Mm-hmm.
straw material from that bean is like the perfect mulching material because it has a good balance between carbon and nitrogen. Now we're getting a bit into the technical terms, but it's just a perfect mulch material because it covers the soil. It de-digests, it decomposes, and it improves the
Hmm.
soil. So using that is a great one. And then what I would invest in as a school as well is to look into a kind of food forest or perennial food system where you're focusing more on berries and other perennial plants. And yeah, that does require a bit more of a design approach to do it optimally, because if you just throw in a bunch of
Hmm.
plants, it's not going to work. You do need some thought around it, because I explained to you in a nutshell how nature works, but there's way more complex symbiosis between plants. So if you put them together in a certain way, it becomes very efficient. And then more recently, I think what can also help to reduce the work, but obviously, why do we want to reduce the work in the garden? Why can working in the garden as with the children not be something fun and healthy? So I don't necessarily see we can optimize it, obviously, but I think it's a great
Yep.
activity to do with children. And in fact, it's proven that just by the mere fact of working with their hands in the soil, their own health will
Hmm.
improve drastically. Because what I said about the soil microorganisms and our own gut health, it's proven that if you put your hands into the soil, our skin can actually absorb these microorganisms, and it improves your personal gut health and your brain health. So that's another way of saying, like, it's really good to work in the garden. It's going to definitely improve your health directly, even without eating from your own garden. So I
Yeah.
wanted to add
Mind,
that
body,
in.
and soul, right?
Exactly. Definitely. So, and
Wow.
then
And
to answer your question, I think there's some interesting new developments in more technology related systems, like indoor growing or vertical farming. And there's a couple of
yep.
very, I know a lady who builds or helps even schools to set up vertical towers, which is in essence a hydroponic system. It's very easy to set up. It's
Yep.
very easy to maintain, and it can give produce throughout the year. Like, even if there's a small room in winter, if it's freezing outside, if you have a small room, you put the towers, you put an extra
Yeah.
lamp, and you can grow food in winter even.
Yeah, I think those are definitely gaining popularity in the United States, and I'm absolutely an advocate for that. As if going outside and getting into the mulching and all that, and getting the commitment from students and other school leaders to keep up with it, I think that's a
Yeah.
great solution. So to end things off here, let's just discuss how can people connect with you, get to learn more about what you're doing, possibly get involved with your masterclass. Where can people go?
Yes, thank you for asking that. And you know what I will do? Well, if people are interested about having their garden designed by me, they can go and look on my website, www.paulonia-la.com. I think you'll put that in the show notes. They can see a couple of references. And if
Yep.
people feel like I want to take things in my own hand and I want to go for it and learn it myself, what I want to offer to your audience is that I will give them a free 30-minute coaching call where I will explain them how they can actually start their own journey as a gardener. I'll talk a bit more about details and what they need to do to get into that. So I'll share with you a Calendly link here, and then people can jump on a call with me, and from there they will learn how to create their own garden. So I'm happy to
Love
do
it.
that. If people want to learn more directly about the masterclass, they can go to the website www.gardenofyourdreams.com. Isn't that amazing that I got to get that
Yeah.
URL? It was still
That's
available
a
and I didn't
great
have to pay a lot
URL.
for it. So
Love
gardenofyourdreams.com.
it.
And then there is like a few snippet videos of other teachings that might interest them, like some free content. There's one really cool one about
Love
goji
it.
berries. Have you heard about goji berries?
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. Those have been gaining popularity here as well.
Yeah, I showed them how you can grow them, and it's fairly simple. And the health benefits of goji berries, it's incredible.
Nice. I got to start incorporating more of that into my diet then, for sure. I'm trying to eat
Definitely.
healthier these days. All
Amazing.
right, awesome. Well, thank you again, Matthew, for coming on. And everyone, feel free to reach out to him if you have any questions, whether it's school garden or a community garden, even. He wrote his master's thesis on that. So don't hesitate to reach out to him and ask any questions or take advantage of that 30-minute call. I mean, what more can you ask for from someone that is doing projects all over the world, including in the United States? So, everyone, you're all remarkable academic food ambassadors. Thank you for listening. Matthew, thank you for everything you're doing. You are an ambassador as well because you are helping contribute to the success of remarkable academic foods across the nation. So, everyone, until next time, I'm your host, Joshua Miller, and our guest, Matthew. Thank you again for joining us. I am signing off.
Thank you, Josh.